You know, every so often in the history of medicine, something happens that just completely changes the game, and we are living through one of those moments right now. After decades, literally decades of trying, doctors have finally done it. They've successfully transplanted a human bladder. This is that story. It's a story of a medical marvel, sure, but it's also the story of one man's 7-year wait to get his life back. Just take that in for a second. That one sentence tells you everything you need to know. This isn't just about some complex surgery, it's about restoring a basic, fundamental piece of human dignity. For the patient, a man named Oscar Lorenzar, this was everything. This was the end of a very, very long road. So for 7 long years, Oscar lived without a bladder. It was a reality forced on him after a tough battle with cancer. And his story is just such a powerful reminder that behind every single one of these medical headlines, there's a real person just hoping for a better life. And it brings up a pretty big question. It's a great question, isn't it? I mean, think about it. We've been transplanting kidneys since the 1950s, hearts since the 60s, lungs since the 80s. On the surface, a bladder seems, well, simpler than all of those, right? It's basically a bag. So what took so long? Well, the answer is hidden in its surprising and, frankly, completely underappreciated complexity. It turns out the biggest challenge wasn't the bladder itself, it was all about its wiring. See, we tend to think of it as just a simple storage pouch, but its real magic, its genius, is its connection to the body's command center, the nervous system. So, here's the key thing to understand. Your bladder does absolutely nothing on its own. It's always waiting for orders. Your brain sends these tiny electrical signals down your spinal cord, telling the bladder muscles, okay, relax, time to fill up. And then at just the right moment, it sends another signal. All right, contract, let's go. Without that constant chatter, it's just a useless pouch. Now let's compare that to the heart. A heart transplant is, of course, incredibly difficult, but in one really important way, it's simpler. The heart has its own internal pacemaker. It's got its own little electrical system that tells it to beat. It can do its job on its own. A transplanted bladder, though, it's completely useless unless you can perfectly reconnect all those external nerve signals so the brain can talk to it. And that is a massive, massive challenge. And the need for a solution here is just immense. I mean, while some people need a new bladder because of neurological issues, the number one reason by far is cancer. More than 500,000 people are diagnosed with bladder cancer every single year, and for a lot of them, the only way to save their life is to remove the bladder completely. But you know, the nerves weren't the only problem. The pelvis is a really crowded neighborhood, surgically speaking. It's got this tangled web of blood vessels that makes any operation in there a total nightmare. And then you have the usual transplant problems, like the high risk of organ rejection. And for a cancer survivor, the idea of taking drugs for the rest of your life that suppress your immune system, well, that's terrifying. It could open the door for the cancer to come back. So given all these massive hurdles, what have people been doing all this time? I mean, you can live without a bladder, but the solutions we've had are, let's just say they're far from perfect. Let's take a look at the 2 main workarounds that doctors have been using for decades. Okay, so option 1 is what's called an ileal conduit. Basically, surgeons reroute your urine to an external bag that you have to wear. The biggest downside here is you have zero control. Option 2 is a neobladder. They create a new internal pouch out of a piece of your small intestine. This gives you more control, which is great, but it has its own serious risk. Your intestines are designed to absorb stuff, and when this new bladder starts absorbing acidic urine back into your bloodstream, it can cause a really dangerous condition and even lead to kidney failure. So yeah, neither one is a great long-term fix. You know, the search for a better solution isn't some new thing. This is a story that goes back over 100 years. And honestly, for most of that time, it's been a story of failure. But every single one of those setbacks taught us something crucial on this long, long road. I mean, look at this. Way back in 1917, early animal experiments were a total failure. In the 1950s, an attempt with silicone bladders was a complete disaster, leading to multiple deaths. In 1987, a partial transplant seemed to work, but it was rejected after just 5 months. Even in the 2000s, there was this really promising idea of growing new bladders from a patient's own cells, but it just proved too difficult to replicate reliably. For a solid century, this problem just seemed impossible to solve, and that brings us right back to Oscar Lorenzar, because after 100 years of setbacks, finally, All the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. It was the right patient, the right surgical team, and a brand new game-changing technique. So what was it? What made this time different? Why did this attempt finally work when so many others had failed so spectacularly? Well, it came down to a perfect storm of innovation and, maybe most importantly, finding the absolute perfect person for the procedure. Oscar was, in a very unique way, the ideal candidate. First off, his intestine was too damaged, so the standard solutions were completely off the table for him. But here's the crucial part. He also needed a kidney transplant. That meant he was going to be on those powerful anti-rejection drugs, no matter what, and just like that, the biggest risk of a bladder transplant. It wasn't an extra risk for him. All of a sudden, the scales just tipped. The whole thing finally made sense. The other key was this absolutely brilliant surgical innovation, and it came from practice. A lot of practice. The surgeons worked on corpses and brain-dead donors. And they figured out a whole new technique. They realized they could connect some of the most difficult tiny blood vessels outside the body while the donor bladder was still on ice. This made the most complicated part of the surgery inside the patient way, way simpler. And so, on May 4th, 2024, it all came together. Oscar Lorenzar received a new kidney and a new bladder, and just a few days later, he could do something he hadn't been able to do for 7 years. He could pee on his own. It was a simple, private moment that represented a monumental leap forward for all of us. Now we have to be realistic here. As incredible as this is, it's really just the first step. We still don't know what the long-term effects might be, or if his body could still reject the organ down the line. The surgery is part of a bigger, clinical trial, and there's a lot more work to do before this ever becomes a common procedure. But this one success has completely redrawn the map of what's possible in surgery. It forces us to look ahead and ask a really exciting question. If the bladder is now possible, what impossible organ is next? It's just an amazing testament to human creativity and our stubborn refusal to believe that something can't be done. It's stories like these that really change our perspective on the world. If this story helped you see things differently, like, subscribe, and join us for more stories that make learning feel alive.